All right, now today we're going to get to page 152, and we are going to multiply decimals. And if you remember what we did yesterday, or what we talked about yesterday as far as multiplying decimals was concerned, there was a certain time in this whole process in which we started to account for the decimal. Remember when that was when we multiply? Do we account for the decimal as the first thing we do or the last thing? Right, the last. And as we work through, we had examples like, and we said, okay, I'm going to take a look at the actual integers and say I'm going to multiply a 6 times a 3 and get 18. But then finally I'm going to see, okay, I've got one decimal place here, one decimal place here, 1 and 1 make 2. I go 2 places. 0.18. What? Okay. So we're going to get to that today, but we're just going to work through maybe some larger numbers. So 2.5 times 2, you may have to set them up as such. Now, when you do this and you multiply decimals in this way, you do not have to line up the decimal, because we're going to be counting the decimal places when it's all said and done anyway. You don't need to add, in a sense, it's adding extra work, because what you don't need to do is this. Okay? Because technically, if we were going to line up the decimals, which we do when? We line up the decimals when we add or subtract. We don't need to line them up when we multiply or divide. So here, let's do the one in black the way we're supposed to do. 5 times 2 is 10. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. With one place after the decimal means I'm going to move one place. My final answer is 5. How does that work if I were to line up the decimal? Well, 5 times 0, 0 times 2. As I move over to my next place, I have to drop a 0. 10, 5. Add them up. But this time I have 2 decimal places. 1, 2. Do I get the same final answer? Is 5.0 the same as 5.00? Yeah, it's the same thing. But when I say we do more work, where does the more work come in? Well, the more work comes in having to set it up that way. You add yourself another column in which there's, the more you have to add to it, the more chances we are that we make mistakes. We want to keep it as simple as possible. Okay. Yes? How did I get the 2.5? I just came up with it. Decimal. Just made a decimal. You're going to see problems like that. Okay? The whole title is called Multiplying Decimals, so that's what we're going to see. So you may see instances where they have money, and they say $4.10 times 6. Okay. All right, so we don't have to line up the decimal, which is nice. We just have to multiply. $4.10 times 6. 6 times 0. 6 times 1. 6 times 4. 2 places after the decimal combined in this problem mean I go 2 places. The final answer, $24.60. So the multiplication facts don't change. It's just a matter of when it's all said and done, make sure to account for your decimal. Okay. Try one? Sure. Okay, so 2.8 times 3. Eli, 8 times 3. Is what? 24. So the 4, and then bring the 2 up. Then Eli, 2 times 3 plus 2. Okay. How many decimal places do I have? So I need to just move that one place, and my final answer is 8.4. Yes?
Oh, if it's more than one behind a decimal, maybe you got two decimal problems, you move two spaces.
Well, let's take a look. You're right. If we have 2.2 times 2.3, any lining up with the decimal that occurs when we multiply is strictly coincidental. Means I didn't do that on purpose. It's just the way the numbers worked out. And that's okay. So here, we're going to go through our multiplication. We're going to say 3 times 2 is 6. 3 times 2 is 6. What do I need to do as I move my multiplication from the 3 to the 2? Put a 0 there, a placeholder as we move over 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is 4. 6, 10. Okay. So, right, Casimir says, all right, I've got one decimal place up here, another decimal place there. Gives me a total of 2. I need to go 2 places. So, 5.06. And if you estimate, we've got 2 times 2, basically. So a little bit more than 2 times a little bit more than 2 should give us a little bit more than 2 times 2. Right. So we have a little bit more than 4 because I've got this extra after my 2 times 2 as my whole numbers. Okay? Carlos.
I never really got like a 0
It's just a placeholder. It's just a placeholder because now you're not multiplying the digit here that's in the 10th. You're multiplying the digit here that's in the, now it's in the ones place.
I always thought like you put it up for another 100.
Okay. 4.6 times 1.2. Your turn. All right, here, let's look carefully. 2 times the 6 is 12. 4 times the 2 is 8 plus 1. As I move from the 2 to the 1, I've got to drop that 0. 1 times 6, 1 times 4. 2, 15, 5 with 1, 2 decimals, 5.52. And again, you have to really be careful because a lot of you, for some reason, had 6.52 and not 5.52. If you rounded and you said, okay, 4.6 will go to 5, 1.2 there, you should get something in the neighborhood of 5. Well, maybe you'd say, well, I had 6.52. That's not that far off from 5. So it still is possible to miss the actual answer even when you do estimate. So just be careful and just make sure that you are going through the processes the way you're supposed to. All right? We'll do a couple more, but I think, that's essentially the gist of it. I want you to take a look at this before you write anything down. You have 5.4 times 1.02. Okay, 5 and 4 tenths and 1 and 2 hundredths. Now, what is it that you know about the order of multiplication? What do you know about the order of it? Does the order matter? Desi? Well, if I were to set this up, and I'm going to set it up like a regular multiplication problem, any suggestions about what you would do? Yeah. I could. That might be more work for myself, though. I could find a better way without having to do that. Yes? No, that's not an option. No, we don't line the decimals up when we multiply. Hello? Sure. Okay, Liam. 40. Tess! No! Mariah! No, I'm not adding any zeros. Frank! Yep. That's probably the way I would recommend it. You can do it that way. 1.02, just put it on top. You can multiply in any order. So since the 1 and 200ths has more total digits than the 5.4, then put that one on top. It's not impossible. You could do it this way. You could totally do it this way if you wanted. You're just going to have 3 rows underneath here. And then when you get to this one, you got to add 2 zeros. And so here, I think it's just a little bit tighter, a little cleaner. All right. So we go through. Well, you go through. All right. Here we go. Now, if you got it wrong, just watch carefully. Start with the 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 0 is 0. 4 times 1 is 4. When I move from the 4 to the 5, I must drop that 0. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 0, 0 plus 1, 5 times 1. Now we're going to add them up. 8, 0, 5, 5. Okay? Now, watch. How many decimal places up top? How many on the bottom? So it gives me 3. 1, 2, 3, 5.508. Think it through. If you had this 55, and you estimate 5 times 1, that's going to give you 55? No. So you have to just be careful and make sure that you are accounting for all of your decimal places. Yes, sure. Yes, sure. All right. If you're not done, take a peek up here. If you are done, you're finished, didn't figure it, whatever, let's walk through it slowly and carefully. As I look at what I set up, you have 3 total digits. 3 total digits here as well. Disregard where the decimal is. You're not lining anything up by the decimal, okay? You're not doing that. The decimal will take care of itself because we look at that as our last thing. So we'll get to it, just ignore it for now. I mean, put it in, of course, but don't worry about where it is in relation to the other decimal. So now, I've got to work with the 2. Times 3 is 6. 2 times 8, 16. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3. Check your first rows, okay? If you have it set up this way. Here we go. Let's move on. Now let's work with that 6. If I work with that 6, what has to get done? That is 0. 6 times 3, 18. 8 times 6, 48 plus 1, 49. Now it's a 4. 6 times 1 plus 4, 10. Now, when I work with the 8s, I had to go over 2 places, which means 2 zeros. When I went over 2 places for my starting, I have to have 2 zeros. So now 8 times 3, 24. 8 times 8, 64, plus 2, 66. That's a 6. 1 times 8 is 8. 8 plus 6, 14. All right. Now, I've got to add this all up. 6, 14, 13, 17, 7, 5, and 1 with 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So 1, 2, 3 puts it right about there.
Wait, I need another one.
Okay, now time to identify your mistake. How many of you, just by a show of hands, know that you were doomed from the start because of the way you set your problem up? Okay. Are there any questions with the setup of the problem? Okay. Frank, you had 8.62 on top? Fine. That's also an option, but I'm worried about people lining it up by the decimal and getting confused that way. Okay? You multiply, it doesn't matter if you're multiplying regular integers, fractions, or decimals. If all you're doing is multiplying, the order in which you multiply does not matter. You can multiply in any order that you want. So if you preferred this way as opposed to this way, that's okay, as long as everything was lined up the way it was supposed to be. How many of you found out that your mistake came when you either didn't add this 0 or you didn't add the 2 when you got down to the third row? Okay? So those are a couple of things right there that we've got to look for. How many of you made your mistake because your basic multiplication facts were off for something? There were some tough ones in there. You had your 8 times 8, which is the 64, and you had your, is there a 4 times 6 times 8 in there, which is the 48? I mean, there were some in there, some that were, relatively challenging. You must make sure that you give yourself enough room on your paper, because you don't want to have it all crammed in there and make a mistake because you can't read it the correct way. Okay? Let's try another one. 14.2 to 34.5. No. Because we did it in class. So I'm just going to keep it as is. And as I walk around, I can tell that most of the problems are coming with this third row. Not all, most. So I'm going to start with the 5. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 4 is 20, plus the 1 is 21. 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 2 is the 7. Now, as I move over to the 4, I move over one place. I must drop a 0. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 4 is 16. It's now a 1. 4 times 1 is 4, plus the 1 is 5. Here, now I'm going to work with the 3. I've gone over those 2 places. I need 2 zeros. If I were to have a 4th digit here, how many zeros would I have to put down in the next row? 3. So the first row you use no zeros. Second, well, this was just by chance. The second row we got to add 1. The third row we add 2. So now we go ahead and we say 6, 12, and 4. We're going to add them up. 0, 9. 13 plus 6 is 9. No. 13 plus 6 is not. 19. 6 and 2 is 8. And 4,
I see where
1, 2, 489.9. Yes.
Okay. So I put the 34. I put the 34 over the 14, but I got the same exact answer.
Hey, you hear that? She put the 34.5 above the 14.2 and got the same exact answer. Is that a coincidence? No! Casimir, what's 4 times 2? Casimir, what's 2 times 4? Did we take them in a different order? We didn't? Did we get the same thing? It doesn't matter! You can multiply in any order you want to.
But I would use it, but it was so different.
All right. Now I set it up for us up here. Hopefully this is the way you set it up as well. We'll walk you through step by step. 2 times 3, 6. 5 times 3, 15. 4 times 3 is 12 plus 1 is 13. And 6 plus 1 is 7. As I move from the 3 to the 6, what must I do? 0. Now 6 times 2, 12. 5 times 6 is 30 plus the 1, 31. 4 times 6, 24 plus the 3, 27. 6 times 2, 12 plus the 2. Now I'm going to add 2 zeros because I'm going over those 2 places. To the 1, 1 times 2 times 5 times 4 and 2. So 6, 7, 6, 14 plus 5, 19, 9, 3 with 1, 2 decimal places, puts us right there. Decide. So you find you see it, and now you're going to be okay. All right. Okay, worksheet 7-2. Pick 6.